How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Billable Time. My name is Mo Hussain. I am a 1L dual JD student at the University of Windsor and University of Detroit Mercy School of Law. In today's episode, we had an awesome guest, Justice Lloyd Dean, who's also my criminal law professor. We had a discussion about a whole bunch of things, whether it be what it's like being a judge, what it's like sort of teaching, advice for students. Great conversation, great guy. Hope you enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Billable Time. My name is Mo, and I'm here with, obviously, someone who I hadn't seen in a very long time, maybe 20 minutes ago, because we just had criminal law together. My criminal law professor and Justice Lloyd Dean. Thank you so much for joining me. So I guess, given the thesis of this podcast is kind of understanding what it's like being you. What's it like being you? What's it like being a judge?
Well, it's pretty. I mean, as most people might imagine, that aren't in the legal system. Being a judge would sound like it's really cool. And it is really cool. It is really cool to be a judge. But, putting aside that coolness of being a judge is the seriousness of the position. So, the coolness is there and it's cool. But, as you grow in time of being a judge, it's not so cool to talk about with people. So you hardly ever bring it up. In fact, I try not to tell people what my profession is.
Wow.
And the people who know about me in that profession really talk to me about my job.
Okay.
Because they assume, rightly so, that he doesn't want to be. He's just out here to enjoy his round of golf or his game of pickleball or whatever it may be, or he's relaxing, wherever. He doesn't want to talk about his job, and that's right to assume that. It's cool, but it's also a very serious, demanding job.
Mm-hmm. And so with that, what kind of, just building on that point, what about the job do you feel like is something that you kind of makes you kind of either there's a reluctance to talk about or something that you kind of rather keep to, I guess, your own in that sense?
Well, one of the things that, there's two things that people always want to, in my family and people who know me well, it says, not so much with my case, but a case that they heard in the news or is, has drawn a lot of media attention is, how could that guy get off? Right? Or how could they only get that sentence? Yeah. So those are the two things that come up a lot, and people probably get somewhat annoyed with me that I won't talk about it much. But what I try and relay to people is that I'm not there in the courtroom to hear all of the facts. So it's really unfair of me and also unfair of them. But I understand people who aren't in the business, why they have these reactions emotionally to things. But really, as a judge and a former prosecutor, you realize that you're not in the courtroom, you don't hear all of the facts, so you can't really comment on why something was done.
Exactly.
Unless you know everything.
For sure.
So, yeah.
Bit of a tough dilemma, but so I appreciate you kind of talking a little bit about it here today. I guess if I had to take a little bit, kind of go a little back into your journey, what would you say, I guess, even got you into wanting to be a lawyer? What kind of got you into wanting to do law school?
Well, football.
There you go. That's one way.
I was finishing up my business degree, my undergraduate business degree, and I had played 2 years of varsity football. So I had 3 more years of eligibility because you have 5 years of eligibility at the university level. And my coaches and some scouts from the CFL thought I needed at least 1 more year of university experience before they would even consider looking at me for a professional CFL career. And so my coach suggested I apply to teachers college, which at that time was just 1 year. But why don't you apply to law school? It's 3 years and it matches your eligibility. Okay. Just in case 1 more year doesn't work out.
You found that kind of fit the puzzle a little bit. Yeah, there you go.
That's the only reason I applied to law school.
Wow.
And the whole time I'm in law school, I'm just thinking about being a football player. I'm not thinking about being a lawyer. Until the football career doesn't work out, and now what am I going to do?
I could just imagine the commissioner at the draft, with the first overall pick, we now select from Windsor School of Law.
Never happened. That's right, it never happened.
But that's interesting you mentioned that. I think sometimes a lot of times there's a lot of pressure as to, I need to have this figured out and I need to have this exact. But you're kind of a testimony of just someone that was just like, okay, I'm kind of just doing this just because it kind of fits in, as with a lot of people who might, graduate with just a degree and are like, okay, maybe I'll try this out. But describe, I guess, what were those days like in terms of how you managed to kind of get through law school in your time? I mean, might be different than obviously what a lot of people are now going through, but describe kind of that law school experience, even though it was something that you hadn't really forecasted.
Yeah, I think, but the same principles that helped me succeed in law school are the same principles I would tell you and the other students. And fortunately, I was, because of my sports background, as well as how I was raised, I was disciplined. Right. So, I knew that, like, one thing that athletics, at least at a high level, teaches you is how to be disciplined, how to time manage, how if you want something, it requires you to work hard.
Right.
And there's also a sense of you don't want to fail. And so even if when I was in law school, even though I wasn't, let's say, committed to being a lawyer, I knew that I was going to work hard enough.
Exactly.
I didn't want the embarrassment of failing. So, and that's the same with sports. The worst feeling is when you go out on the sports field and you feel like you let your team down and you let yourself down because you didn't either put in the time or work hard enough. And so that's really what that competitive spirit is, what, and the discipline and all the tools that I learned in sports, and also just growing up, and the messages and the teachings of my parents and other mentors. That's what drives you to at least succeed, if we want to call it success, of passing the courses and getting your degree. I knew that a law degree was not going to hurt me, even if I didn't practice law. It was only going to help me with whatever I decided to do. It was another thing I could put on my resume that would show people that I was somewhat intelligent, somewhat a hard worker, because you can't get through university, undergrad, and law school without being someone who is at least has a certain level of working hard.
Exactly. I mean, the one benefit I could have seen if the NFL dreams did come true would be, you could probably the only player on the field that could do like analogical reasoning. While like there's like a 4th and 1, like in the middle of it. I don't know if that's possible, but you can maybe whip out like, oh, this thing. But anyways,
let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about sports at a high level.
Okay.
The players themselves, you practice and you study film so much. Everything you do on the football field at the moment is about reaction.
Wow.
You just react because you're trained that way. It's the coaches that do all the analyzing. That say, 3rd and 1 in Canada, 3rd and 1. Because
CFL, yeah. Okay. Yeah, there you go.
But it's about, okay, what play works best, successfully.
Yeah.
But you as a player, when that play is called, because you've run it so many times, it has to be without thinking. Because as soon as you think in any athletics, as soon as you start to think, you don't move freely and smoothly, and that hurts you. It's paralysis by analysis.
Do you find that the same? Do you find that there's like kind of a parallel in the legal industry with that analogy you made of like maybe obviously you have to think to make an argument, but do you find that even understanding law, even being a good lawyer, like has some of that same parallel that you kind of talked about when it comes to the game? Not what
I just talked about, that reacting. Other than this, when you become experienced, whether it's as a lawyer or as a judge, the more experience that you have, things become just, assuming you're doing it the right way.
Yeah.
Because people say practice makes perfect, but it doesn't. Perfect practice makes perfect.
Wow.
So if you go about doing things the wrong way, that becomes how you do it, your habits. You're doing things the wrong way. So as a lawyer, if you do things the right way over a long period of time, it just becomes natural for you. It's like integrity. When you are challenged to make the right choices over and over again, it becomes easier and easier to make the right choices, to make the right decisions. That applies as a judge. When you deal with people over and over again.
Right.
I'll give you an example. If you're sitting in a mental health court, and you're dealing with people who have mental health issues, whether they're diagnosed or not. And they'll talk to you in a certain way. They may not have the proper court decorum. And when you are in that kind of court over and over again, it helps you to understand and realize they don't mean anything by it.
Right.
They don't mean any disrespect. And so you learn how to handle those types of people with the same compassion and love and respect and dignity that you do other people. So the more you do something, just like in sports, the more you do it, the more natural it becomes for you to be that way.
Wow.
But it's not without hard work.
100%, 100%. And so with that, in terms of finishing up law school, you kind of moved into your role as a prosecutor. And given the fact that you're now a judge, I'm assuming you did a pretty good job as a prosecutor, probably. At least I would probably have to think, right?
You did a good enough.
A great one.
How good? It's up to the other people to make those determinations.
Right. But would you say, because I think a couple of audiences would probably be looking into this, some of them being obviously me in a couple of years, but maybe people graduating now, just started their legal career. What do you think are the takeaways from your legal journey, I guess, as a prosecutor, that you think can help someone that's starting to get into litigation, either whether it's, or even if you want to go specifically to people who are getting into prosecution? What are those takeaways from those early days, or even just your time as a prosecutor, that new grads can learn from?
Yeah, I think one of the things that happens, I think, to law students is they get really tied up on their marks. They really, they're focused on getting the highest grade possible because they think that is what's going to determine their future, which to some degree is true, but in my opinion, it's overblown, way overblown, because it depends on where you're applying, how many are applying to. Like when you first get out of law school, maybe your first job, they want you to send a transcript.
Right.
But I can tell you, after my first job, I never got asked for a transcript. It was always about what did the people who had observed me working alongside them, what did they feel about me? What did they think about me? Not about my grades. What did they think about my work ethic? What did they think about my character, my integrity? What did they think about my values, how I treated people, how I treated coworkers? Was I a person that they enjoyed working alongside?
Right.
Those things are way more important than grades. Way more important. And the one thing you have to work on, at least I had to, and I think all of us have to, is just becoming this person that people cannot question your integrity.
Right.
Because they see over and over again when you've had to do some really tough things that you really didn't want to do.
Right.
Because the easier way out was to do the wrong thing.
Right.
But even though it might have harmed you, like your ego, or you would have to admit that you made a mistake, or you did something you shouldn't have done. When you can admit those things, when you can learn from your mistakes, and learn how, okay, I did that time, it was wrong, I shouldn't have done that. You own it, you confess it to the person if you're able to. Listen, I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have done it that way. And the next time you get that opportunity, you don't do that.
Right.
And that's the part that you just have to grow as you get older and older and older until, again, these decisions become your habit, which your habits become your character. You are what you repeatedly do. That's who you are. It's not about the words you say. It's about the actions, and people are watching. So when you talked about me being someone that obviously, I was a good enough prosecutor.
Right.
What I learned when I became a judge was from the other judges who I had appeared in front of, what they shared with me about what they liked about me as a lawyer. I realized it was mainly about how I treated other people and how I treated the judge, how I treated the staff, how I treated the other lawyers, how I treated whether they were witnesses for the crowns or they were the accused before the court or witness. They saw how I treated everybody with the same respect and courtesy and dignity. And that's what yes, of course I had to be prepared. Of course I had to know what I was doing and show that I knew what I was doing and be organized and so on. But those attributes, because there's a lot of lawyers that have all of those other things. They're smart, they're organized, they're prepared, they know the law, but they don't treat everybody with the same respect and dignity. And you notice that as a judge. I can tell you, after 19 years as a judge, I'm sitting out there looking at people. I see their facial expressions. I see how they turn and look at people, how they turn their back to people.
These little micro expressions are something you consider.
And how they treat witnesses on the stand. There are a lot of good lawyers, but they wouldn't be good judges.
Wow. And so maybe I'll get to the point about what does make a good judge later on. But in terms of, I think sometimes there are a lot of people that I know, for example, that want to get into the criminal law system, that want to be criminal lawyers, maybe even want to end up being as judges. But the information on how to even do that is something that's probably missing. What would you say right now if, let's just say someone watching this wants to end up being like you and end up being a judge? What would you say is the route for them to take to kind of get to that point?
Just what I just spoke about. What I would tell them is, don't make being a judge your goal, because that will happen naturally if your goal is to be the kind of person that I talked about. Right? How you treat people. Yes, you're prepared. You are, of course, smart enough to know things. But if you're also smart enough to admit, Your Honor, I haven't considered that. If I could just have a brief recess for me to consider how to respond to that issue or that question that you have. So there's that part about being smart enough to admit that you don't know something. But just everything that I talked about, I would tell them your goal should be to become the best version of yourself you can be. And then when you apply to be a judge, it's really like winning the lottery, because you're not the only one who's going to have those characteristics. So it really comes down to just putting yourself in a position for someone to consider you, even though you may not get it. There are people that apply 7. There's a person I know that applied 11 times before they got appointed as a judge. So, they were always being considered, but someone else got it. So that's why I say it's like winning the lottery.
Right.
But your goal, because if you make your goal being a judge and you don't become a judge, you're disappointed.
Right.
But if you just make your goal being the best version of whatever you're doing as a lawyer, that's your goal, then the other stuff is like icing on the cake. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, I'm enjoying what I'm doing right now. That's the key, is to find something that you enjoy before you become a judge. So that if you don't become a judge, nothing's changed. I still enjoy what I'm doing.
Interesting. And so I guess what would you say, like as a judge, that you find is the biggest, you alluded to some of the positive things a young lawyer, an up-and-coming lawyer could do. But what are like some things you've seen as a judge where you've gone, did you even go to law school? what kind of things do you see that kind of biggest mistakes you see young lawyers make?
You know how I was talking about the right way to be and the right way to thinking? So the right way of thinking is not for me to have in my head that thought of, did you even go to law school? Okay. All right. Now, listen, trust me, there are some judges that would say that thought out loud.
Okay.
Anytime I even start to have that thought, there's another voice in my head that's saying, Lloyd, that is not the right thought to have. That's wrong. Get that thought out of your head.
So you actually have that, because a lot of people I think say that, but I don't know how many people actually genuinely can have the humility to is that something that you actually, let's say if you see something like that, you have to kind of fight the urge to do that?
There are things that you have to fight the urge. Mo, if you had a microphone that you could listen to my thoughts. As a judge in a courtroom, my thoughts are way more entertaining than what I'm actually saying in the courtroom. Okay. Because there's these challenges that are going on, and there's a fight. You're a human being. You have emotions. You have feelings. You have thoughts. They're not all pure.
Exactly.
Some thoughts you can't do anything about. Some thoughts that come into your head, but what you have control over is what you do with those thoughts. And when you let those thoughts linger, the chances are it's going to escape out of your mouth. But if you learn, that's a bad thought, get it out of your head. Those are those sort of habitual things that I talk about. I'm not perfect.
Right.
I don't recall as a judge saying something that I regretted. Maybe there's one thing, but I can't give you an example because I just trained myself. Close those lips. Don't let them come out, because My mother used to teach all of her children. Once those words are out, they're like feathers in the wind. You can't get them back.
Wow.
You can't get them back. So you have to really focus on, is this the right thing to say?
Right.
Remember, on the board, and I put, I think, one of the first classes.
Yeah.
Is it kind?
This is a quiz.
No, it's not a quiz. It's not a quiz.
I was like, this would have been the biggest trap of all time. So Mo, pop quiz.
Yeah. I think I asked the quiz right. Is it kind? No, first thing I think, is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary? So I think about that when I'm about to say something.
Mm-hmm.
Is it true what I'm going to say? If I don't know if it's true, don't say it. If it's true, is it kind? Okay, if it's kind, why not say it?
Right.
If it's unkind, think to the third question. Is it necessary?
Wow.
Because if it's not necessary to say it to someone, why say it? Because it's unkind, even if it's true.
Wow.
If it's not necessary. Sometimes it's necessary because you're trying to learn or teach somebody.
Exactly.
Something. You're trying to guide them.
Yeah.
So it may sound harsh or unkind, but I'm saying this to try and teach you and help you, not to make the same mistake. Usually I'm saying not to make the same mistake I made.
Yeah.
Because I made plenty of mistakes along the way.
Mm-hmm.
People look at me now and say, "You're a judge. What could you have possibly done wrong?" But I've shared with the class some of the mistakes I've made when I was a teenager, when I was in my 20s, young 20s. Yeah,
For sure.
Yeah, I have a lot of things that if I had to do over again, they're lessons that I learned from.
Right.
But I wish I didn't do them in the first place because they're humiliating, embarrassing, and plus there's other people that were hurt or harmed.
Exactly.
Mostly. Mentally or spiritually by my mistakes.
And not only, I think maybe that could, even you just talking about that is kind of just serves even someone of your someone with your position and your kind of stature is even can have the humility to say that is something really valuable. But obviously those things have led to the person you are today. So that's who's teaching us an incredible class. So that's great. But what would you say, I guess, mindset wise, is the biggest difference as a judge? Well, in terms of how you approach the law or how you approach an issue. Obviously the rules are different, but what's the kind of change in mindset from being a judge and then also being a prosecutor?
Yeah, there's a difference. There's a difference. We talked about that whole scenario of when a lawyer does something, you have those thoughts about, did you ever go to law school? Being a lawyer is all about, the most important thing is about just being prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Just be prepared. You're not going to know everything, but with the time that you have, because depending on what type of law you do, whether you're a defense lawyer or prosecutor, which is primarily the experience of my legal career, is sometimes if you had more time, it's like your exams. If you had more time, you would do better. But you do whatever you can with the time you have. You did the best you can. And that's as a judge wants to see a lawyer that's prepared. And then those other qualities about treating people respectfully. You don't have to like them, but you treat them respectfully. Mm-hmm. They're deserving of your respect. So as the difference between being a judge and a lawyer is, as a lawyer, you had way more preparation that you had to do. Because you had to argue the case.
Exactly.
You had to examine the witnesses. And so you had to learn how to do that. And put it back into sports. As a lawyer, you're playing the game.
Right.
Now as a judge, you're the referee on the sports field or the umpire behind the plate. You're calling the shots. You're managing people's behavior out on that field. So as a judge, you're the umpire. You're not supposed to be the participant. So you're there. The most important quality of a judge, or one of the most important qualities, is your ability to listen.
Wow.
Listen. And carefully to everything, because you don't know what's going to be said next. The lawyers have an idea because they prepared the case, but you don't know what's coming. So that's one of the main things you have to learn how to be, is to be quiet. Less talking, more listening as a judge. Yeah.
Sure.
Then ultimately the buck stops with you. The thing about being a lawyer is that you can always say, well, I don't have to make the decision.
Right.
It's on the judge.
Yeah.
So that gave you a sense of, you do the best you can, but ultimately I can't control the decision. Mm-hmm. I can try and help the judge make a decision, but the decision is the judge. So now as a judge, I don't have anybody to run to turn it over to. I have to make the decision. And that's where that burden, that heavy weight comes, that, I got to decide this. And whatever you're going to decide, especially in criminal law, it's going to affect someone's life, future, family, even the community as a whole.
Most definitely. And just the last question I'll ask in terms of your experience as a prosecutor. Let's just hypothetically say that someone who may or may not be in law school, that may or may not be interviewing you, that may or may not be in your criminal law class, just hypotheticals, is like passionate about litigation, but the idea of like being in court is like a little daunting, right? Like, I don't know who would think that, but right? Let's just say
you may not
let's just say because clearly it's not. Yeah.
You might have the charisma to do it. Okay?
No.
Right.
But let's just say you're passionate about litigation, but the idea of, let's say, being in court is something that can be a little daunting, and especially like not only like obviously within law students, but people that newly just graduated. What do you say to people that have the passion to do it, but are lacking the confidence to fully kind of commit to that?
Yeah. So, you know, when I was in elementary school, I was terrified of speeches.
Mm-hmm.
I was so nervous, right, to get up in front of the crowd, the class. And you know, as going on in life, and there were certain times where I'd have to get up and talk in front of a group, and you're nervous. You still get nervous talking in front of a group,
Mm-hmm.
but you learn how to manage those nerves. You know, I always say that nerves are like fire.
Right.
That if you can control a fire, it can cook for you.
Wow.
It can heat your house.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a nice campfire.
Mm-hmm.
But if you let that fire get out of control and you don't pay attention to it, it can harm you.
Exactly.
Burn your house down, cause all sorts of damage. So that's what nerves are like. It's impossible. I don't know if anybody can say they can get up in front of a courtroom or an audience and say there's absolutely no nerves.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if you get up in front of the same people over and over and over again, but you're never up in front of the same people over and over again. There's always new people. So, you know, I think the thing is, okay, nervousness is okay. How can I control it so it doesn't harm me and I can still perform?
That's an interesting way to
And the more experience you get doing it, the more comfortable you become with the nerves.
Wow.
Not comfortable with no nerves, comfortable with the nerves.
Wow.
Okay, I've been here before. Let me just focus on. And one of the ways you can control the nerves is to be prepared. So when you're prepared, the nerves are less, not eliminated. Because you don't know what that judge or what the people who you have to talk to are going to answer and you got to respond to. One of the things that can help people, I think, which I had to let go of, was wondering what people thought of me when I got up.
Wow.
What were they going to think of me? And if you cannot worry about what other people think, which is tough to do, but just try not to worry what the other people think. Who is your audience that you care what they think? And as a lawyer, you care about the judge or the jury.
Wow.
Or both. You don't care what the audience thinks behind you. You know, if you're making a living being a comedian, right? Which I can see Mo trying to do.
Yeah, that's it, guys. I'm dropping out. Done. I'm not doing it anymore.
You're trying to get the audience to laugh. So you got to try and figure out, how do I get them to laugh? But when you're a lawyer, you have to believe me. When I first started, I worried about what the people in the audience were thinking about my performance, which was wrong.
Wow. Which was wrong. That's interesting that you mentioned that, and I think it's a very important thing that I think a lot of times people have this idea of wanting to become a lawyer because of whether it's TV shows, totally not Suits. I would never ever want to be a lawyer off that show. Rookie mistake. But I think it's in terms of watching that, but then ultimately succumbing to a fear or a thought. So managing those nerves is definitely something that's super important.
Sure.
When did you? I'm curious. You said something about getting to a point where you kind of didn't really care about what other people or other I guess outside of your primary audience. When did you always have that, or was there a point in your career where either it was a moment or a culmination of moments that you kind of felt that? At what point in your career, even life, did you feel you can kind of go up in front of a courthouse and not really care about what everyone besides the important audience thinks?
I don't think it has ever stopped.
Wow.
What I've learned to do is when I've had those thoughts, is to learn to brush those thoughts aside.
Wow.
But I had those thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to say when did you ever become comfortable or not ever having those thoughts? I probably have those thoughts every time
Hey guys, sorry for cutting that off. Actually, I didn't even cut it off. My camera actually cut it off. Screw you, camera. No, but basically, sorry if I kind of cut this off. During the interview, my camera just suddenly just stopped recording for some reason. Technical difficulties, new equipment. So just the last like 5-10 minutes of that discussion, fortunately got cut off. But if you enjoyed this discussion so much, I totally don't mind doing a part 2 and sitting down with Justice Lloyd Dean one more time. He was an incredible guest, a lot of insights, as I'm sure you know. And so if you guys want to see a second interview, please let me know. And once again, apologies for the technical difficulties which happened, but I'd love to just sit down and resume the conversation if you guys would like. So let me know what you think. Justice Dean, thank you so much for taking the time. And like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.